about venture, what does it really mean, right? It sort of means a lot of things to many people. It may mean something very differently for a venture capitalist. Naturally, that's the first thing that comes to our mind when we hear the word venture. We immediately link it to venture capitalist VCs. It also might mean something entirely different for, let's say, somebody who's running an incubator like myself. It could mean something very different for, let's say, an early stage startup. Some of you are that today. It could mean very different for, let's say, a government ecosystem or a government department which is looking at, let's say, the Startup India scheme, right? And for the people in the government who are implementing that scheme, the word venture might sort of mean something very differently, right? Irrespective of what everyone wants to think about venture, what I thought is most important in terms of having a definition is around understanding how this relates to building a venture, right? So naturally, it's got to be seen in the context of an innovator, a founder, an entrepreneur who's going about building a venture, right? So in that context, I'd like to think of a venture as a high growth company, a high growth company, right? And what is this high growth? Basically this: any company which is able to grow its revenues at NX when compared to the cost to achieve that revenue growth grows at X, to have that order of magnitude difference between the revenue growth and the cost growth is basically high growth, right? Now, how is this possible? Naturally, this is possible if, let's say, you are in a very big market. So you need a very big market in order to be able to grow at such high rate. One. Second, you have to be able to make sure that your product is very viral, right? So as customers acquire your product, you're able to retain them. Not only are you able to retain them, you also are able to grow additional customers, or acquire additional customers through word of mouth, through referral. Maybe your product even has what are called network effects, where the value that a customer derives out of using a product grows when there are more such customers using the same product, like WhatsApp, for example, right? Now, for the high growth to be achieved, you naturally need to have a distribution model that is highly scalable at a very low cost. So naturally, all internet distribution channels lend to this kind of a high growth possibility. And we've seen the kind of growth that, let's say, e-commerce startups and companies have had in the country today, right? Naturally, what separates them from physical brick and mortar retail companies is essentially their ability to distribute through internet as a channel, right? You take SaaS, for example, right? I could sit in Chennai, build a SaaS startup and have customers the world over, because my distribution and my sales are all through online digital means. And actually, this is a very highly scalable distribution sales model at a very low cost, right? So all of those things come into play when it matters in terms of what are those growth factors which will make a company achieve this revenue at NX growth at cost at X growth. This order of magnitude difference could happen due to many reasons, and that essentially is what the innovation, the entrepreneurship is all about, right? So we come up with innovative ideas. We try to see if those ideas can become the leading brand in that particular category of products, and we're also able to put together a business model, a revenue model, a distribution, customer acquisition, sales model. And all of those things in a manner that we're able to support and achieve this kind of a growth, right? Now, the word startup. So we've looked at venture and we said a venture is a high growth company. We understood what high growth really means at a very practical context. Now, what is a startup? Simple. A new company with the potential for high growth, right? Now, if you were to think in terms of, let's say, the founder, right? Now, a founder would always want to think about his or her startup as having potential for high growth. Now, that statement that it has potential for high growth, basically what underlies that statement or that assumption is basically a lot of assumptions, right? So it's a lot of fiction, it's a lot of hope, it's a lot of ideas, right? It's a lot of ideas that yes, my startup has the potential for high growth, right? But it still needs to be converted from a fiction to a fact, right? So it's got to be proven that yes, this startup does have the potential for high growth. Obviously, everything starts with an idea, an assumption, but sooner that you're able to translate that assumption into evidence and from fiction to fact, the better it is, right? Now, this is how, let's say, a venture capitalist, a VC, would like to define what a venture is, right? So let's say we take a simple graph, two axes. On the y-axis, we basically have what's the size of the market, right? So what's the target addressable market size? This is in terms of value, right? In dollars or in rupees, right? So we're basically saying a market which is bigger than $10 billion in size, right? And a venture is something that has a generic solution in a big market. So naturally, this dot that you see, the yellow dot that you see, is at the very top right corner, where it essentially is a generic solution for a big market, right? So that is the ideal situation to be in, right? So this is what all venture capitalists out there are looking for, all angel investors are looking for. That's what entrepreneurs should be aspiring to, right? That's what innovators, founders should be aspiring to, in terms of, hey, that's the kind of position on this graph that I want to get to, in terms of becoming a generic solution in a big market, right? Now, if you look at the x-axis, it's kind of interesting, right? It's basically an evolution in terms of how the common factor increases. Now, what's this common factor, right? Very simply put, how different is this product between customer to customer? Or in other words, how common is this product between customer to customer? So naturally, the very word product means that it's 100% common factor, right? So no matter who you are, as long as you fit a certain customer profile, right, the product that a company manufactures, sells, distributes, retails is basically the same. You might buy it in different, through different channels, but the product remains the same, right? So if you were to take, for example, a smartphone product, right, it really is 100% common factor, right? Now, a stage beyond that is essentially a commodity. So this is getting into the maturity of the product and the maturity of the market and so on and so forth. But essentially, in the context of innovation to venture, right, when we're coming up with a new innovation and we want to translate that innovation into a successful product in the market, win a large market share, possibly emerge as the category leader. For all of those things in that context, essentially this would have started as an idea, right? It's just an idea. It's just an idea to solve a problem, right? An idea to cater to a need, an idea to, let's say, address a well-known gap in, let's say, a particular market, in a particular category of products, which gives an opportunity for someone to come in, disrupt, differentiate, and try to become the new paradigm or the new definition of what that category should be, right? So all of those things starts at the stage of being an idea, right? And then essentially, again, we're talking about industrial markets, right? So always keep that in mind. We're talking about industrial markets, building technologically advanced solutions for those industrial sectors. So essentially, your customers are companies that operate factories, that operate huge supply chains, that operate vast distribution networks. So complex systems, those are the kind of companies that you're trying to target, right? As an industrial deep tech startup, for example, right? So you're basically starting to work on a few projects, right? So you're basically looking for, hey, which customers have this problem, have this need, Can I start building something? So essentially going from an idea, you're doing a bunch of projects and basically trying to test whether this solution really works, right? Right. So it's a lot of prototyping activity. It could be done as projects for a few customers to start with, but over a period of time, you're able to actually see this come together as a well-defined solution, right? So you're basically able to say, hey, for this kind of a problem, for this kind of a target customer, for this kind of this set of benefits or value, this is a solution, and that solution will have a much higher degree of common factor across those customers who, let's say, you have done some successful pilots in, right? So that it sort of evolves to a solution stage, and then from there on, it sort of moves into a product stage where it's standardized, right? So we use the word productized, right? We talk about commercial solution. Essentially, it's something that has become standardized across, let's say, a segment, right? So if you take a segment of customers within a large market, for example, let's say there is a AI, IoT, machine vision startup, which essentially is looking at bringing predictive maintenance and asset monitoring capabilities to manufacturing companies. Right now, there are several types of manufacturing companies. Right, you could have automobile manufacturers, you could have cement manufacturers, you could have electronics manufacturers. Right, so maybe they have segmented based on the vertical. Right, so they may have said, okay, we will look at manufacturing automobiles as one segment. So for that segment, you have so many customers. Right, a product is something that's 95% common factor across all of those automobile manufacturing companies in that segment, or it has 100% common factor across all customers who are essentially cement manufacturing companies in that segment, right? So it could be at a segment to segment level, or it could be across an entire market too, which is the best thing, right? So the leader, the true leader in a particular market would be someone that cuts across segments and is able to build a generic standardized product. Naturally, the scalability of such a product in that market is enormous, because you don't have to really worry about segmentation, and you don't have to really have a lot of those things which break the scalability growth, right? You don't have to really do things differently. Your distribution can be common across the market, retail, sales, everything can be across a much larger market. So that's, on the one side, that seems like the best thing to do, but otherwise, segmentation also offers an opportunity to create a differentiation. It helps you build a more value-added product for maybe a competitively lower price. So you're able to create that kind of a stronger pull within a particular segment, and you may use that as a way to emerge as the eventual market leader, right? So naturally, in innovation, at the very core, you're looking at differentiation, right? So naturally, segmentation is a very important strategy in order to be able to make sure that your product has the best fit to the customer and is able to deliver compelling value that no other brand or competitor in your context is able to even come closer to, right? Those are definitely things we have to sort of keep in mind, right? So essentially, when we say venture, this is what we really have to visualize in terms of what does it mean, right? In terms of having a product with a very high common factor across customers and in a market that's significantly huge in size, right?